What's up, guys? Welcome to Ice Fishing Basics. This video is going to be made for people who are brand new. People who are looking into getting into ice fishing for the first time, and maybe people who are just kind of curious what this ice fishing thing is all about. Everything we talk about today is going to be a general overview. I'm going to have individual videos going deeper into each single category that we do. Okay, so we're going to talk about the things that we need, the absolute essentials to go ice fishing. The first thing, which is going to seem like kind of a no-brainer, but we have to go over it, is this. This is a fishing license. Every state and or province is going to have a Fish and Wildlife, Game and Fish, Department of Natural Resources, all of these different things that are going to be responsible for licensing for hunting and fishing. So in the state of North Dakota, we go to the North Dakota Game and Fish website, and it's as easy as filling out a couple of forms online, and there you have your ice fishing license. Well, it's a fishing license. You can also go into local sporting goods retailers, and they can get you hooked up as well. Now that you have a fishing license, it comes down to how do I travel on the ice safely? How do I make a hole in the ice? And how do I get fish out of it? So traveling on the ice safety is a tough one, because the best way to think of ice is that it's never completely safe. So if it's early in the year, we carry something called a spud bar. And a spud bar is kind of a giant end of a crowbar that we use to check the thickness of the ice. I will make a video or link a video because right now there's about 2.5 feet of ice. Really difficult to show off a spud bar, showing the proper usage of a spud bar. Basically what we want to do is always assume that the ice isn't safe so that you're being extra cautious. Okay, besides that, if it is well into the ice fishing season, there's usually going to be established roads and trails. So if you want to drive your vehicle on there, there is, again, another resource for us to find how thick the ice should be to drive a vehicle on it. I'll link that in the description of this video as well, just so you know. You can do that. I just like to try, especially if it's somewhere that I haven't been before, not to get too far away from where majority of people are at. Getting into some safety equipment, one of the biggest ones for me is something called ice picks. Now, my ice picks are in my pickup, and they are deep in my ice fishing things because, again, right now we have multiple feet of ice, but ice picks are something that goes around your neck that if you fall in, if you break through into the ice, you use the ice picks to climb yourself out. Now, I'm going to, again, link a video. I'll try to use cards in here. I'll link a video that shows the proper uses of ice picks. And next year, when it's early season, I'm going to go break through the ice just to show you guys how to use them. Okay, so now we know how to get around on the ice, and we have some tips to try to keep it as safe as possible. Then it comes down to figuring out where to fish, which if you're just an open water fisherman trying to get into ice fishing, you know this. But for a brand new person, there are quite a few different variables that we'll look at when it comes to finding out where to fish. Number one is what kind of fish are you fishing for? Number two, what kind of lake are you in? And number three is, well, what time of the year is it? Most of the time you can't go wrong with fishing some sort of a transition, and I'll show you how to find that on a different video that's going to be reading lake maps. That would be a good one. Again, I'll have a card that kind of tells us how to get there. Anywhere that goes from deep to shallow is going to be a transition area that usually holds fish. Real quick before we get going any farther, guys, if you like this video, please help me out. Hit the thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. We are going to be putting out a pile more of these, showing everything from the basics of how to tie some knots, how to pick bait, all the way down to how to use high-end electronics. My goal is to make a reference for you guys that can be useful for everybody. Okay, back to it. Okay, so I mentioned we have to get around on the ice. Then we have to make a hole in the ice. Now what I use is an electric auger. Well, it's actually a drill conversion. Oh boy. Okay, so I have a Milwaukee drill onto, this is, the brand is Eskimo. This is a pistol bit. And what this does is this has a little shaver blade on the end. Now, there are a variety of different augers, a lot of different augers. For the longest time, gas augers ruled the business. If you're looking into getting into ice fishing, brand new, you're going to be able to find secondhand gas augers everywhere on Facebook Marketplace, in your local classifieds. There's going to be a lot of those. Hand augers are another great option if you're just starting. Hand augers you can usually buy for about $50 brand new. How a hand auger works is, well, take away the drill and add you. It works on a crank system and you crank the hole in by yourself. Now, depending on where you are in the world, we live in North Dakota. North Dakota gets a lot of ice. We need a drill. It's the only way you're getting into the ice here. If you live a little more south in a place that doesn't get as much ice, you can actually get away with using your spud bar as a chisel, and you can chisel holes out. You see people doing that all the time in the early season, where you just want to hold and get less weight. You're already using the spud bar to get out there, so they use the spud bar to get their hole. Guys, if it's that early that you're worried about weight getting on the ice, I just think if you're brand new and you're watching this video, give it some time, let the ice thicken up, and even if you can, try to find somebody that will go out there with you. It's that easy. You don't want to make a mistake when it comes to early ice, because a mistake ice fishing can be a pretty bad thing really quickly. All right, so augers. Again, we'll have a whole video talking about different kind of augers, different styles of blades, different kinds of power heads, all of that. We'll go into that in that video. Now, the last real thing you need to do is figure out a way to catch the fish and get it out of the hole. These on the table are all ice fishing rods. You can get into an ice fishing rod as cheaply as $10, $15. These two rods here are combos that I bought when I very first started at, I think this one was at Shields, and I think this was a Mills Fleet Farm. And I don't believe I paid more than $10 each for these. When you get a cheaper rod and reel combo to start with, you're going to get cheaper components. It's just how it is. The biggest thing that I care about, guys, when you're doing this is the line that comes on these things is usually very cheap and it's really thick. When you're ice fishing, if you're ice fishing for something like a northern pike or a big walleye, thicker line's okay. But if you're fishing for something like a perch or a bluegill or a crappie, you're going to want thinner line so that A, you can feel your jigs, and we'll get into tackle and jigs and things later, and B, you don't have big slack because of the coils in your line. So if you get something like this, check to see how thick the line is, or just go about buying your own line. And fishing line and ice fishing line has its own different usages depending on what it is and what you're fishing for. So in this video here, we are going to go through all the different types of fishing line and what you would use it for. Okay, the next step when it comes to buying fishing rods is you can go into buying just the rods and the reels a little separate. You're going to spend a little more money, probably closer to that $50, $60, $70 mark, but what you'll get is something like this or like this. So these are both Jason Mitchell ice fishing rods. They are, we'll say, a middle of the road rod. They're a great rod, especially if you're just starting, but I use these all day, every day by myself. And then I've got a Shields Outfitter reel on them that, again, I just picked up at Shields when I was there. What you're going to get here is a little bit more species specific, a little more fishing type specific. So for this is a fiberglass rod and it's got a lot more bend to it. So I use this for what they call a dead stick. I can also use this for jigging little perch. I'm going to talk tackle in just a little bit, but I've got a very thin line and I've got a very small jig on here. I have good feeling with this rod. I can see what happens with the line and I can present a small bait for smaller or more finicky fish. The second one here, it's another Jason Mitchell rod. It's just a little bit different. It's got more of a backbone and then a nice little tip. Okay, and so what I use this for a lot is small jigs. When you use a really small jig and you're fishing for like a perch, you want to be able to see little bites. So if you get a rod like this that has a really flexible tip, but some backbone is what this is called, it allows you to see the bite and then set the hook. Okay, so this is a middle of the road type rod. So next are custom rods. You can spend between $100 and $300 on a rod. I know. It's for some people, it isn't for others. If you're just getting started, guys, as much as I love a lot of these custom rods, it might not be in your best interest to get them. You can get started with all of your gear for the same price that you could pay for one rod and reel combo. Now for these weren't that expensive, but what we have is a fiberglass blank with a lot of backbone, but a really flexible tip. Very similar actually to that Jason Mitchell rod. That's why I started buying those. But this is a good rod when you're jigging for perch. I have one also that's a bit longer. Okay, and it's got more stiffness to it, and it has more backbone, it's called. And what backbone means is you have a rod, and that rod's gonna have some bend to it. And when you set a hook, which means you're lifting the rod up high, it's going to load up, which means that it's going to pull on that string so that you can put that hook into that fish's mouth. The harder the backbone, the straighter it stays here, and the more force you can put into the line. Okay, so this is something that I use for walleyes. It doesn't seem like it needs to be this confusing, but once you get into it, it's something that will come absolutely second nature to you. All of these rods and reels have their own place. If you're just getting started, I can't recommend enough a rod like this. This is a dead meat. It's a Jason Mitchell ice fishing rod. It's a 32-inch medium action. Okay, and so that means it's got some backbone, but it also has enough sensitivity that you can pretty much fish anything with it. Now, if you put that on with some sort of a middle-of-the-road reel, this is a Shields Outfitters spinning reel made for ice fishing. And right now on this one, I have got a 5-pound, which 5-pound might be a little bit much, but somewhere between 3 and 5-pound monofilament that runs all the way to the tip because I'm not looking for giant toothy critters. So that all might sound like a different language to you, but by the time you get through the video series, you're going to understand everything that I'm talking about. Okay, finally, again, if you're just trying to go to the store, grab some things, and go out ice fishing for your first time ever, you're going to need some tackle. When I'm thinking about tackle, I have a couple different categories. First is going to be the most basic, something called a dead stick. A dead stick is a way that you present live bait to a fish. You put the rod in a rod holder, you put it down as close to the bottom as you can, maybe bring it up a little bit, and then you let the minnow or whatever you have down there do its thing. Right now, I have this rod set up as a dead stick. What that means is that I have a small bait holder hook. I have two, they're called split shot weights, and you'll be able to find split shot weights and bait holder hooks at any place that sells fishing anything. And that is pretty much it for a dead stick. There's an option of putting a bobber up here and a bobber stop. And I will teach you again in another video how to rig up a bobber and a bobber stop, how to rig up in general a dead stick line. But this is the dead stick presentation. Put it in a rod holder, give a little bit of line between your minnow and your weight, get it down close to the bottom but not quite on the bottom, and then just watch it because when you get a bite, you'll see the tip start to move. That's a dead stick presentation. Probably the easiest and most hands-off way to ice fish. The next piece of tackle that is essential if you're going to be fishing, especially for smaller panfish, is going to be a jig. Now, this is a tungsten jig, and this jig is so tiny you might not even be able to see it on this video. But a tungsten jig is made of, you got it, tungsten, which is a very dense, very heavy for its size material, and a small hook. On this small hook, you can tip it with either a minnow head, you can tip it with a perch eye, which I know what it sounds like, but very durable and a really good piece of bait. Depending on where you live, you got to check your regulations to make sure if it's a legal or not legal thing. Or you can put wax worms or maggots on there. I've even seen lots of guys that use rubber bait, just little fake baits. Those are all things that are great on a jig. A jig's job is to drop and be a weight directly connected to the bait so that you can control it just a little bit off of the bottom. Jigs are absolutely essential when it comes to fishing. If you have a jigging rod and you have a dead stick rod, You have two really good proven ways to catch some fish. Third is something called a jigging spoon. Now, my go-to is a buckshot spoon, and this is made by Northland Tackle, and you'll be able to find this, again, just about anywhere that sells tackle. There are plenty of different companies that make very similar pieces of tackle. Basically what it is a large lead spoon. It's a bigger bodied piece, and I'll do my best to show that to you there. It's got a little rattle on the back, so when you jig this in the water, you can hear a little bit of a noise, and that can help attract some fish. And then it's got a big treble hook on the bottom, and that big treble hook is where I'll put my bait, very similar to the jig, either a minnow head or some maggots or waxworms. Okay, that is a jigging spoon, and they have those in all sorts of different variations. You can get them heavier, you can get them lighter, you can get more flat ones that flutter more. Guys, the more you get into this, the more you're going to get more random tackle, and you just figure out what is your confidence baits and what you like the most. The last things that I think of when it comes to tackle are attractant style baits. And these here that I'll show you are called Rippin' Wraps. And what that is, it's a hard-bodied plastic bait that has, hear that, a lot of extra noise in there. And this hard plastic bait is designed to really attract fish. It makes a lot of noise, there's a lot of motion, and fish come running. Well, swimming. Most often what I see is we can run these at the same time as having a dead stick, which is just live bait swimming, and this will attract the fish and the fish will bite the dead stick. Okay, that was the basics of getting started. What do you need to go ice fishing? I am going to make videos now talking about all of the things that we just discussed and breaking them down into more detail, as well as putting together a library of different topics, all the way from how to find a lake to fish, how to read lake maps, getting more and more and more complex for just about anything that we can think of. Pretty much my goal is going to be, when I do something, I'm going to ask myself, are there people who might not understand what I'm doing? And if so, how do I teach them? Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you like this series. We're going to make a series like this on ice fishing, and once the open water season comes into play, we'll do the same thing there. Oh, thank you guys. We'll see you next time.